Hello students, today we're going to be talking about our writing skills, just the fundamentals. Let's go back to the very beginning. You should have in front of you a sheet of paper that says Lesson 1 Guided Notes, and you are going to see up on the screen these words that you can place into the blanks. Here's some examples, and once I go over this it will make much more sense, but make sure you have the Lesson 1 Guided Notes. Okay, today we will discuss the 5 things that must be present in a complete sentence. We'll call them the 5 requirements for a sentence. You will need to include all 5 requirements in every sentence you write. You will need to take notes as you learn about the 5 requirements. I will expect everyone to participate in your thoughts as I go through this exercise. As I said, there are 5 requirements for a complete sentence. Okay, so here's some of the requirements. So we're going to, start with a capital letter. What is a capital letter? Well, a capital letter is actually a letter that is bigger or larger than the others. So when you draw or write a capital letter, no matter what letter it is, it should be a bigger letter. Okay, so the importance of that is that a capital letter is a signal to the reader that a new sentence is beginning. What do you think of when I say the word signal to you? What are some examples? Well, let's think about that. There's a stop sign that signals you to stop. A green light signals you to keep going. A circle with a cross in it signals that a railroad is coming. You see signals all the time. Even if your mom, for example, if she puts her hand up when you start talking to her, maybe that signals to stop talking and to wait for her. Well, the same thing happens when you are writing. When you write, you have to signal to a reader with a capital letter that a new thought is beginning. We will discuss the use of a symbol to help us remember the capital letter at the beginning of the sentence. So this Capitol building right here, that looks like our Capitol building, that's kind of like a good signal that we might see in the room where you are going to have to start a capital letter. Alright, so if we always have a signal in the beginning of a sentence with a capital letter, how do you think we end a sentence signal? Well, of course, it has to have end punctuation. You've got a period, a question mark, and an exclamation point. When you are done with a thought, you must end it and end that thought. So we do call periods end punctuation because periods are punctuation marks that come at the end of a sentence. So what other signals do you have? Of course, let's go over that one more time. You always have a period, a question mark, or an exclamation point. You'll always find one of them at the end of a sentence. Now, we only use one of these 3 punctuation marks at a time to signal the end of a sentence. We use either a period or a question mark or an exclamation point. The capital letter signals to the reader that a new thought is beginning. It is like a green light. It tells the reader to go. The period, question mark, or exclamation mark signals that a new thought has ended. It's like a red light. It tells the reader to stop or pause and take a moment to think about that thought before going on to the next sentence. Why would we want to give signals to people who will be reading or writing? Well, how can the signals even help them? Well, you want the reader, when they see your stuff, to know when to pause in the reading or to stop in the conclusion. You don't want all of your ideas to run together and to confuse people what you're trying to communicate. Alright, so far we've talked about how we start and end a sentence. We haven't talked about what goes in between the capital letter and the end punctuation. Well, what do we put here to make a sense? The in-between portion? Well, to have a complete sentence, you need 2 types of words. Now this is where it's going to come in handy. There's 2 types of words. There is a subject, the subject. Now the subject of a line is a person, place, thing, quality, or idea that the sentence is about. So let's see what that looks like when I write it. The subject of a sentence is the person, place, thing, quality, or idea that the sentence is about. Now notice I did cue you to go ahead and write in your notes or signal to you, and that's important that you understand the signal. So again, here is a sheet. The subject is the person, place, thing, quality, or idea that the sentence is about. Let's think of some words that fit into each of the other subject categories. Who can think of a word that represents a person? Well, your name would be a person. So, for example, on your notes it says Jenna. Jenna went for a walk. Jenna is a person. Then in your next example it says the store was closed. Well, the store is a place that you go to, so that can be a place. The store, it could also be the name of an actual city, Gulf Breeze, Navarre, Pensacola. That is also a place. You also have balloons rose to the sky. That's a thing. Balloons, books, backpack, those are just items, and the items are things. You also have the quality. When it says silence filled the streets, it's the quality of something. It could be silence filled the streets, or anger roared out of her. It's that quality. It gives almost like a embodiment to a word that we normally use to describe. And then idea, like peace and tranquility, those are ideas. They're just concepts that we know what they are, but they're not something that we can see every time. So those are ideas. Those are the examples of your subject, the person, place, idea, or quality of what the sentence is about. So we always want to include a subject in a sentence. So when we do that, we're actually going to use, oh, where's my card? See if I can see it. All right, there it is. So when we go back to having a sentence, we have a start with a capital letter and punctuation. We need to have a subject. We're going to signal that with an S. So if I want you to signal to me what your subject is in the sentence, you would write an S. Now there are two types of verbs. The second kind of word that we have to include in a sentence is a verb. And we're going to talk about action verb first. So the action can be something that a person does with his body or something the person does with her mind. Now just remember, an action verb is a word that shows the action of the subject of the sentence. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're showing the action of the subject of a sentence. That's the other important part that we have with a sentence when we're creating one. Now, an action verb is a word that shows the action of the subject of the sentence. Examples would be, let's talk about body actions. Those are something you can see a body do. Walk, run, jump, play, throw, catch. Those are all things that body actions can do. So make sure you have some examples on your notes. So body actions, what I had up there is I had walk, then I had run. You could also add throw, catch. Those are things your body actually does. Now let's go back to the other type of action. It's called a mind action. You know it's happening, but you can't see it because it's up in the brain. So it's something like think or want or hope. Let's write some mind actions down. Think, want, hope, determined, if you want to go a larger word. Amanda determined that she was going. So determined was just a mind action. You know she did it up here, but you can't see it. So those are some things that your mind can do and your body can do. Those types of actions are very helpful. Now to remember to always include a verb in a sentence, we're going to use our cue or our signal V for verb. You have to have a verb. So far we have 4 requirements to a complete sentence. Let's go over them. We have to start with a capital letter, have an end punctuation, have a subject, have a verb. Those are the 4 things that you definitely need in a... Okay, so for example, if you wanted to say the sentence, the boy jumped, you have a capital letter with the T, the end punctuation is that there's a period, the subject is boy, and what did he do? He jumped. So that would constitute as a complete sentence. However, we often have thoughts that go longer than a couple words. So the last thing that you want to do is make sure that it makes sense. And I did a signal of an arrow because that's the in-between the subject and the verb, or between, I should say, the capital letter and the end punctuation. That's what we need to make sure makes sense. Between these two things, we have to make the connection. So let's look at another sentence. The book smiled. Let's see if I were to write that. The book smiled. Okay, so I have a capital letter, I have end punctuation, I have a subject right here, and I have a verb. Now, does it make sense? The book smiled. Well, no, that would not make sense because a book does not have characteristics to be able to smile. So, while yes, this is a technical sentence, without that 5th element, it would not make sense. So it is imperative that a complete sentence have all 5 elements. You need to start with a capital letter, end punctuation, have a subject, have a verb, and then check to make sure it makes sense. The 5 components is what is the best option for writing or the only option for writing a complete sentence. So when you see this, that's to signal to you that you have to make sure that it makes sense. Okay, so let's take a look at some additional sentences. Okay, so the example, and you're going to have your own sheet that you can check with me. Make sure that you have your name, the date, and go ahead and put which period you did this. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you get a sheet of paper is name, date, and period. Then you want to do the instructions. Check whether each sentence begins with a capital letter, has end punctuation, and makes sense. Fix the sentence by adding a capital letter or end punctuation or by changing a word. For example, it says the boy played. Well, did it start with a capital letter? No, so we fixed it. The next sentence, the dog ran, did not have an end punctuation, so we fixed it. Sally sang a tree. Well, you can't sing a tree, so it was marked off tree and then put song above it. That's how you fix it. The boxes are for you to not touch. Do not worry about those boxes. Those are for me. You only worry about over here. Okay, so we are going to take a look at the sentences for your example. So here we have the moon swam. So the moon swam, I'm going to start with my 5 components. Remember, start with a capital letter. Does it have a capital letter? Yes. All right, let's check it. Does it have end punctuation? That's our second component. end punctuation? Yes, it does. So now I'm going to check, is there a subject? Yes, there is. Moon, is there a verb? Yes. And swam is what the action did. Now let's see if it makes sense. The moon swam. A moon can't swim, so I'm going to mark this off, and I'm going to put shine right here. I'm going to put an S at the end because I want to make sure that it makes sense. So if I were to read the moon shines, okay, that makes sense. See how each of the 5 components are really important. When you get done with this video, make sure that you are aware of all 5 components. Capital letter, end punctuation, subject, verb makes sense, because I'm going to ask you to say them with me so that they get stuck in your head. I really want you to know all 5 components or requirements. Remember that important word, the 5 requirements of a sentence. Okay, so we did the requirements on the first section. Now let's talk about Sally likes school. Let's check the first one. Do we have a capital letter? No, we do not. So I'm going to add the capital letter. Then we're going to check for end punctuation. And we're going to find our subject. Well, the sentence is about Sally, and what does she do? She likes. That's a thinking verb. It's a mind verb. So Sally likes school. Does that make sense? Well, yes, it does. So I'm done with that sentence. Now let's talk about my mother drove. Does it begin with a capital letter? Yes. Does it have end punctuation? No. So I'm going to put a period and circle it. And now I'm going to find the subject. Well, mother is what the subject or what the sentence is about. What did she do? She drove. So there's my verb. My mother drove. Does that make sense? Well, yes, my mother can drive. And if she did it yesterday, I can say my mother drove. So it does make sense. Let's go back to this one. Does it have capital letter? No, it does not. I need to fix that. Does it have end punctuation? Yes, it does. And I need to note my subject. The sentence is about I. And what is the verb? What is happening? Well, it's a brain or a mind verb, and it's a wish. So there's my verb. Now, does it make sense? I wish. Yes, it does. It makes perfect sense. If you wanted to, you could even read it with attitude. I wish. And it still makes sense. Okay, now our 5th sentence is Peter eats fish. Let's go through our 5 requirements of a sentence. Let's start with a capital letter. Does it have a capital letter? Yes. Does it have end punctuation? No. I need a period to go at the end. And then I'm going to go back and find my subject, Peter. That's who it is about. It's a person. What does that person do? Well, it's a body action. Eating is a body action, so there's my verb. Peter eats, and then I need to check and see if it makes sense. Peter eats fish. Well, yes, you can eat fish, so that does make perfect sense. So as you go through, you're going to be doing some independent work after you come see me. So as you're doing your independent work, make sure that you're going through those 5 requirements of a sentence. Remember, a complete sentence, whether I'm writing it or checking it, I need to go through all 5. Does it start with a capital letter? Does it have end punctuation? Does it have a subject? Mark it with an S. Does it have a verb? Mark it with a V. And then check to make sure, does it make sense? All right, so that was the end of our first lesson. I just wanted to go over 1A with you. All of the sentences on the sheet, 1A, have one subject and one verb, so we didn't have to worry about it, but I wanted you to make sure you were looking at those. For each sentence, you can tell me whether it meets the other 3 requirements, capital letter and punctuation, and does it make sense. Make sure that you're doing one sentence at a time. You need to do number 1 completely and fully before you move on. All right, now it'll be your turn to work through the sheet. You're going to be completing 1B independently, which I'll give you once we have a conversation and take a look at your notes. I want to make sure that you have completed your notes and that you can tell me the 5 requirements of a sentence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, independently before you move on to the independent work.